Hello, everyone. It is 12:32 p.m. in New York right now, so I will begin the program. My name is Ian, and I'd like to extend a warm welcome to you all to Central Park. Thank you so much for joining us today. I work for the Central Park Conservancy, and we are the nonprofit that manages Central Park. And we know that it is unfortunately not an option for many people right now to visit Central Park in person. So we hope that these weekly walks bring the park to you, bring you some joy, and hopefully share some new knowledge about Central Park with you all. So our mission at the Central Park Conservancy is to preserve and celebrate Central Park as a sanctuary from urban life, enhancing the enjoyment and well-being of all. So I hope this is a celebration in a sense, and I hope that it does enhance your enjoyment of the park. I see in the chat that we have visitors from all over the world. So wherever you're tuning in from, thank you. As we're reaching the end of the calendar year, I'm usually this is a time of reflection for me. So, and I was thinking about how we started doing these programs this year, and I'm just so grateful that so many of you are supporting us and tuning in to listen to us speak about this really marvelous public space. So really a sincere thank you if you're joining us for the first time or for the nearly 50th time. Yes, and we're going to be walking through the park for about 15 minutes. You'll see photographs that were taken by myself in this past week. And in addition to those, I've used some images from the Museum of the City of New York digital collection, as well as the New York Public Library digital collection and the Parks Department archives. So a little bit of housekeeping first. Many of you are already taking advantage of it, but if you don't know the different features that Zoom has, there's a chat feature that you can use to say hello to either myself and my colleagues, or if you'd like, nearly 300 of us today on the weekly walk, and you can toggle who you'd like to address using that little box that's highlighted in blue. You can see in the middle of this image, you'll see the Q&A feature. So if you have a specific question that you'd like my colleagues Juan or Ryan to answer on the back end, you can use that. And then you will also see some polls pop up on your screen. And per usual, I will begin with a poll. And I know that we have many of you who visit every week, and we're so grateful for that. And so I wanted to ask, just to get an idea, if our walks have inspired you to explore Central Park. And I tried to include an array of options, but if none of them represent your experience, please select other and you can share in the chat. And I will share the results of that in a moment, but I'd like to get the program started. So we'll see Central Park on the left, all 843 acres of it. And today we're at the very southern end of the park. Last week we were in the opposite end of the park, the north, which I talked about being a very wooded area with a lot of rocks. And to me, it creates this sort of natural sanctuary that feels very removed from the city. The southern end, in my opinion, has a very different character because it was, a very key element of the original design of Central Park, in that it was the gateway to the park. In the 1850s, when the park was being designed, and then when construction began, most of New York's population lived well south of 59th Street, certainly the developed areas that you'd think of as the city. And as such, most visitors would be coming from the south. And so 59th Street, in my opinion, served as sort of the threshold into the park. And what we'll really be exploring today, which you can see on this map, are a few different entrances to the park. Of course, you can enter the park on the east, the west, the north, but on the south, the entrances are all aligned with, or most of the entrances are aligned with huge monuments. And so it's a very opulent feel. And when you're coming into the park. On this end, you're entering from Midtown, which is home to some of the tallest buildings on the planet. So there's quite a sudden change as you're walking from the ultimate urban landscape into a green sanctuary. So that's kind of what I'll try to emphasize today. All right, and we're going to jump in right now, but I wanted to share the results of that poll. And it seems like the most popular answer was that you frequent the park, but that the weekly walks have encouraged you to explore new areas. So that's great to hear. And thank you, everyone, for sharing. If you don't want that on your screen, you can X that out. All right, so we're beginning in Grand Army Plaza, and we're looking at the world's largest menorah. So for everyone who is celebrating Hanukkah right now, happy Hanukkah. This menorah was added last week, and you can see it during the day. So it's not lit up, and it was actually right before Hanukkah began. So there are none of the candles lit up, but it's 32 feet tall. It's made of metal, and it's thousands of pounds. You can see it at night. This year, it is covered in LED lights. And the organizers said that these were to represent everyone who suffered from the global pandemic, and their hopes was to bring light to the world. And I thought that was a really beautiful message. And despite everyone being physically distanced right now, I think, ironically, like the sense of community that things like this bring are really needed right now. So I thought this was a wonderful addition to the park landscape. And if you'd like to see it, it will be up until Thursday evening. So tomorrow evening, I believe, will be the last night where it is lit. And behind the menorah, you'll see a permanent feature of the landscape, which is Pulitzer Fountain. Now, this was dedicated in 1916, so it's been here for over 100 years. It's named the Pulitzer Fountain after Joseph Pulitzer, the publisher, who passed away in 1911 and bequeathed the funding for a fountain, in his words, reminiscent of the Place de la Concorde in Paris. And this was the result by architects Thomas Hastings and the sculptor Carl Bitter. And you can see it's all adorned in holiday garb at the moment. And this might not seem like part of Central Park, but it technically is, even though we're surrounded by these buildings here. And I thought this historical image was interesting because it shows a different vantage point. Behind it today is Bergdorf Goodman, the department store. But in this photograph, you'll see the building behind Pomona. Sorry, I failed to mention that. That's the Roman goddess of abundance who is in the center of the fountain. Behind her was a really palatial mansion that was occupied by the Vanderbilt family. So that has changed, but Pomona and the Pulitzer Fountain is still here. All right, so I liked how that was all decorated in holiday lights, but we're gonna get into the park proper now. And so when you enter the park in the south, like I said, you're immediately transported into a sylvan landscape. And we've visited here before if you've attended our other weekly walks. This is the pond, but I thought I'd share, since as we're walking through today, we'll see that the trees are barren, and we're a few days away from the official start of winter. So there's a cool breeze as we're walking through the park. And although, most of the trees are bare and there aren't many flowers out, there's still beauty to be found in nature. You'll see buds on wooded plants throughout. And so if you do get a chance to walk through the park in the winter, just keep your eyes peeled, because you'll see, I think, the really just wonderful patterns that you see emerge in winter. And I want to focus on the park as we walk through Central Park South, but it's hard to ignore the buildings, which line the southern end. And so I think it's part of the park experience when you're at least in the very southern end of the park looking at this architecture. Now, these buildings were not here when the park was constructed in the 1850s and 60s. So the designers of the park did not have this in mind, but regardless, they're here now. And so it's part of the park experience. And I think what's interesting about architecture in Manhattan is how eclectic it is. There's so many different generations of styles that you can see. And so I want to relate that to the park because the way that it's landscaped, you'll see so many different plants and trees lining the area that, we enjoy that kind of eclectic aesthetic as well. And, there's some wonderful architecture along the southern end of the park, but to me, they're intrinsically tied to Central Park. And so when you see these buildings, they're beautiful, but with the dancing trees in front of them, they're made. That's what I think really makes them magnificent and iconic, because they're tied to Central Park, which is one of the best parks in the world, if not the best park, in my opinion. So we will continue keeping these buildings on our left, and we'll have the pond on our right. And even though the trees are barren, we'll still see plenty of green from evergreen plants. And this right here is yew, which is one of the more common shrubs that you'll see in the park. And in addition to some greenery, we'll also see wildlife. We saw the world's largest menorah, and now we're looking at the world's largest squirrel. I saw this guy, I guess, preparing. It looks very well prepared for winter, actually, because squirrels tend to bulk up right before it starts getting cold out, adding fat. And they actually also store caches of food around. So we're expecting snow today and tomorrow. And so hopefully these squirrels are prepared. They'll lay caches of food around, and they'll remember some of them, which comes in handy in the winter to help them survive. And they basically end up. So we've gone past the pond, we've gone the width of one city avenue, and we find ourselves at the next entrance that we're going to look at, which is Artist's Gate. And this is at the mouth of 6th Avenue, which is also known as Avenue of the Americas. And this name was added to 6th Avenue in the mid 20th century in the hopes of spurring some investment, I think, from North and South American companies. That was the idea. And that's why at this entrance, there are 3 equestrian statues that feature heroes from, or political figures from South America and Cuba. And so we'll see 2 of them here. On the left is Simon Bolivar. On the right is Jose San Martin. And you'll see that they're on these massive pedestals. And what's significant about 2 of them, although, of course, you think about the leaders when you see, or the subjects of the art when you see these massive statues, you kind of forget about, or it's unknown sometimes who the artists behind them were. But it's worth noting that 2 of the artists were female sculptors, and there's 5 works of art, well, I guess now 6, with the addition of our new statue, works of art in Central Park by female artists. And 2 of them are here. This is Sally James Farnham, who created this sculpture of Simon Bolivar in 1921. It was a commission from the Venezuelan government. And then my favorite of the 3 was a Cuban revolutionary who fought against the Spanish Empire in the 1890s. And he was killed in battle. And you can see his horse rearing here. And I know the lighting isn't great, but I really like the way that it blended in with the trees to create a silhouette against the blue sky. And this was created in 1959 by Anna Hyatt Huntington, who has quite an extensive catalog of works. But what's interesting, it wasn't added, it was completed in 1959, but it wasn't added to the park until 1965, because you can guess it was such a a tense time between the United States and Cuba, and there was a lot of political demonstrations in New York surrounding the unveiling of the statue. So it had to wait several years, but it was eventually added in 1965. All right, so back into the park. We've seen the second of the three entrances that we're going to look at, but we're going to stop to see some rustic architecture. And on our way up to this site, we'll see some evidence of winter. I know this is not going to get me into National Geographic, this photograph, but I thought I'd just share some evidence that the flurries we saw last week did stick in a couple places. And like I mentioned, we're expecting some more snow today in New York. And next, I saw something that seemed very out of place, given the winter climate that we're experiencing. And that is this Yucca plant, which is located on Cop Cot, the hill next to 6th Avenue. And although it's native to drier, warmer areas of the United States, apparently it's a very hardy plant that's used ornamentally throughout more temperate climates. So this is an oddity that you'll get to see in the park. And just past that plant, we'll see Cop Cot. Cop Cot is a rustic structure that was recreated in 1985. It was an original feature of the park as well. I'm highlighting this because we just saw some buildings in Midtown, or we're about to see some more buildings in Midtown actually. But it really stands out to me because it represents a 180 from the steel glass buildings that make up most of Manhattan. And it instantly signifies that you're in a new place, a place that emphasizes nature over the urban. And when we go in here, we'll see wooden benches made of red cedar, which is a very sturdy, rot-resistant wood. And looking through the twig canopy of the building, you'll just get a glimpse of some of the buildings in Midtown. It's a very popular location for weddings, and in my opinion, it's one of the more iconic sites, or at least this image of Cop Cot with Midtown in the back is very iconic because of that interplay that never seems to get old between the super cutting edge modern and the majesty of nature. And you see rocks and trees and Cop Cot with its twigs versus stone and metal and glass. This view, for that reason, I think is so famous. And I found a postcard of a similar view from the 1930s. And whether you like the buildings or not, I think you have to admit it's a unique site. And I think I always associate it with winter for some reason. I found this postcard that celebrates it in winter. I think there's something about the way that the buildings glow over the landscape, especially when it snows, that creates something really magical. And I can't really put into words why, but maybe if it snows tomorrow and you get a chance to see it, you can try to describe it. All right, so we saw Cop Cot here. As you can see, we've gone over an avenue, and then to end the walk, we're going to continue west towards the main monument. As we walk through the park, there's still some leaves on the ground. We see some horse carriages over there. I wanted to show you one cool bridge we'll get to see today, or arch rather, Dipway Arch, which was constructed in 1860 by Calvert Vaux and Jacob Ray Mould. And it carries bikers and joggers and sometimes horse and carriages through the park. And as a pedestrian, you can just walk underneath that traffic. So I love the way that the park was really influential, I think, in managing the flow of traffic through public spaces in the United States. And you can see underneath the archway, it's designed with red brick. It's a nice place to sit on a hot summer day. And we'll continue past Dipway Arch. We'll see the Time Warner buildings in the background in Columbus Circle. And to end the walk, as we get towards the main monument, I wanted to share a couple nondescript pictures of the park. We've been looking at special features like sculptures and monuments or architecture, which are great, and I love talking about those. But to me, I think some of the most special views you'll get in the park are just the landscapes, just trees and lawns and people going about their day, running, walking with their kids or just by themselves on a lunch break. And there's kind of silent sense of community as you're walking through these landscapes. And that to me is like the real magic of Central Park. And in that spirit, I wanted to share another poll. Excuse me while I access the poll. Here we go. You know, I love talking about history and the art that makes up Central Park. It's one of my great passions, but I don't want to overlook that. I think first and foremost, parks are a place to enjoy life. And so I don't want to let those conversations overshadow that. And so in that spirit, I thought we could all access our inner child and just kind of be hopeful. If you are in an area like New York that's going to be experiencing snow, maybe tap into some good memories you might have in a park, in Central Park, what you like to do most on snowy days. And I'll share those results momentarily. I do hope that everyone is safe if they're affected by the snowstorm. But I thought I'd take that whimsical approach because Central Park in the snow is really a sight to behold. And so one more kind of nondescript photo of trees, and you'll see through one of the trees this gilded monument, which is the monument to the USS Maine. We can see the statuary in front of it here, and you'll get a look of the whole monument. I don't want to get into the history too much because it is, I think, a controversial story from history, because when the USS Maine was sunk in Havana in 1898, it was seen as the inciting incident of the Spanish-American War, and as such, you know, it's a controversial story, but it does commemorate all of those who lost their lives in that tragic accident, and it marks, I think, one of the probably the most grand entrance to Central Park here. And as such, I thought it was an appropriate place to stop, just because the way that the statue sort of beckons you forward. And it's a really great work of art. So I'll end this here, and I'll share the results of the poll now. I see a lot of others, so I hope that the chat is active with those messages. And a lot of people just love staying inside, and I can't blame you. I think that's what I'll be doing in the next 24 hours. But if you do enjoy winter activities, I hope that you get to experience them today. And I hope that this short walk through Central Park was enjoyable for you. And hopefully next week, when I do another walk, we'll get to share some winter images of the park for you. So thank you so much for joining us. Again, your support really means a lot, and it's my pleasure to get to share this space with you all. So please continue to stay connected. And if you're looking for more programming, my colleagues will share in the chat some of our upcoming programming that I'm going to read off now, which is tomorrow, actually, December 17th, we'll have a Trees of Central Park tour at 3 p.m., which is 45 minutes. So if you want something longer, that might be for you, as well as our virtual tour next Tuesday, December 22nd at 3 p.m., which is also a longer form program of Belvedere, the Beautiful Views tour. And then next week, I'll be back for a weekly walk. Like I said, hopefully we'll see the park covered in snow, fingers crossed. And until then, please stay connected with us. You can access our website. You can see the URL on your screen here. And you can view any programs you missed on our YouTube channel, Central Park NYC. So thank you once again for joining us. I hope you learned something new. And if you didn't, then I hope you enjoyed the views of the park as they are right now. So from the Central Park Conservancy, stay safe and be well. Thank you.